The Survivor Specialists are back, and today we are predicting episode number 12 of Survivor 48. I am joined by Survivor 47's Sam Phalen, who is sitting there with a beautiful picture behind him. If you're not watching this live, I don't know why you're not, because the picture, that is serenity right there. Did you pick that up on your recent honeymoon? Congratulations on your wedding.
Thank you. No, yeah, my wife has a very particular taste for the kind of things that we put in our home. So it's a lot of like not yard sales, but like estate sales. Like you gotta really get into some like the OG stuff that people have that they are not taking advantage of in their home. And so a little bit of a vintage look throughout the apartment.
It is. It's fun. I wish you could see what's in front of me. I have a Radigan picture. I have a Prince John picture over there. Two villains from Disney movies. I got Studio Ghibli stuff on the wall behind the TV over here. I got the Planet of the Apes poster. So my wife doesn't really have control over this room. I don't think
that's what I need. I need a room for that. I've got all my like sports jerseys and my Survivor shrine that I've got nowhere to put any of this stuff. My torch is relegated to a corner in this room behind the bookshelf. It can't be shown because it ruins the aesthetic. But like I need all my regalia hanging up behind me.
I don't know. You gotta figure it out where when people walk in the house, the first thing they see is the torch, and we need like a stand up of you. That's what it needs to be.
I want to get one of those. What are they, like shadow boxes where like I'm gonna take my like signature like yellow floral collared shirt and like my yellow Nikes that I had, and I'm just gonna kind of create like a uniform. It's like my own uniform. I might even autograph it myself and put a couple of photos of in-game action there with the torch, all of it.
Sam's going to walk by in the morning, sip his coffee, do a deep sigh as he looks at all that. It's going to be great.
Exactly.
But it's great to have you on here. I mean, you're coming in. We only got 2 episodes left of Survivor 48. You are coming in probably off the most negative that the community, I feel, has been since maybe Survivor 43. I think Gabler's win was the last time that I've seen people this down after a string of episodes. And I was very defensive of this season up until the last 2 weeks. I feel like it took a turn the last 2 weeks, but I don't know if you have positivity to spin. I don't know if you have negativity. I don't know where you're coming from now. I know early in the season when you were on with Rob, you were really dissecting everything. How are you feeling about dissecting now?
Yeah. So I think season 48 is a very, very interesting case study because I do think it is old school in so many ways. And I've seen a couple decent points online in the Survivor community as well, talking about what fans really mean when they say we want old school Survivor. But this has sort of been a hot take of mine for a while, Phil, that I don't think Survivor fans miss old school Survivor like they think they do, like they say they do. I think they miss how old school Survivor made them feel when they were, 10 years younger, when they were a kid watching and they looked up to all the players. I think you maybe miss the nostalgia of old school Survivor, but I don't think you actually miss the game, because I can turn on Survivor China, which we all agree is like a really good season of old school Survivor. And there are episodes in Survivor China where they don't even really talk strategy, where we don't hear from half the cast, where we have no idea what's going on, where it's pretty much a steamroll of the main characters make it all the way to the end, all the way through. It's not the most entertaining game. And I listened to your episode with Austin last week, where I thought he made a really great point of, the storytelling of old school Survivor versus the storytelling that we see in Survivor nowadays is different. And what the show is different. We're no longer infatuated by locations and cool rewards. It is supposed to be a hyper strategic sort of a season. And season 48 is not that. And it's admittedly not that by the players who are on the island in the game in real time. And so that's what I think is interesting and where I diagnosed this season. I think Survivor 48 is, as Kyle said in a confessional a couple of weeks ago, a season based on emotions and relationships. And the problem with a season that is so emotional, so relationally based, is that at home, you don't capture those emotions and relationships like you do on the island. Even, watching my own season back, I think one of the critiques that Survivor 47 players had of our own season was wishing our relationships were shown a little bit more so that you could fully get our feelings towards one another. And so when you don't have textbook, by the book strategy or constant shifting power dynamics, all we're left with to really buy into is relationships, which I don't think an audience can feel or find interesting.
Yeah, no, and my biggest take, and I put this out on TikTok, which if you're listening, you don't follow us on TikTok, please go do that. I'm trying to like build that up. Tegwith joined us and she's like, you got to get your TikTok presence up. So I made one video after Tegwith told me what to do and it gained us 100 followers. And I was like, nice. All right.
There
So
you
Tegwith
go.
knows her stuff. But my biggest take right now is the show used to be about the journey. Now it's about the destination. And I think what the problem with the new era is, and I think that people are not even the new era, but like what's happening on this season specifically and why these last two episodes, my dad who loves old school Survivor, loves this, has been talking about Joe as if Joe was his idol, which is weird because my dad is like 15 years older than Joe. So it's like, come on, dad, chill out here. But like, my dad's been loving this and he's been talking about it. And then he was like, oh, these last two episodes, it feels like they took the weeks off. And I think the problem is back in the day, you had so much going on other than the strategy of the vote. You had the locations, you had the challenges, you had the unique places they were going, you had the way the characters were surviving on the island. At this point, I think Eva's up 5 pounds on this season. Like she is on every award. She's feasting. Every time I see her, she got something on her face. It makes me laugh. But right now, because they're at the 26 days and they're trying to fill 90 minutes, I think what's actually hurting them here is they've gotten really lucky since the jump to 90 minutes that these vote outs have been very strategically based and they've been good. Even 45, which was a little bit of a steamroll season, the Reba 4, you never really know. You had the Bruce blindside with the idol in his pocket. You had Emily's vote out, which was very good. You obviously had the Kelly Nalbandian blindside, which is epic. So you could figure it out in the 90 minutes with 26 days. I think this is the first season where they're realizing we don't actually have enough content that's interesting to show a cohesive story that's not just based around the boot. Because for the last 2 weeks, all I've heard is we got to get Joe out. He's really strong. He's really strong. We got to get him out. They don't vote him out because he wins immunity. Then they don't vote him out when he loses immunity. And I say, well, what was the story they just told me for this hour and a half? It feels like it's the only story they know how to tell right now with the footage that they have.
Yeah, it's, I think the best thing as well, another great point that I think you made it or Austin made it that I just want to speak to a little bit more is like, what makes a good season of Survivor? And I think the simplest answer is we want to see an arc, not only for the game, but for the players that are playing the game and these characters that we watch on our television screen. And I think, like, let's look at my season. Let's look at season 47 and look at the people that made it far in deep into the game, people that made a run, right? Andy has one of the most interesting arcs of the new era of, you know, this sort of metamorphosis throughout his time in the game as the easy first boot that, you know, is feeling all kinds of insecure on day one and slowly but surely builds up his confidence, sometimes gets overconfident and then has to try to like correct his way and see how he navigates the end of the game. I think that's entertaining to watch as a viewer. My story is, you know, playing from the very, very top and running things early on to then having to become this scrappy underdog playing from the bottom. And how do I navigate that? We watch Genevieve have this sort of evolution in her personal relationships and how she plays as like a game bot versus how she plays as a human being and a friend that relates to people. Rachel has this underdog story and this crazy immunity run that is always keeping that target off her back. Teeny has this like massive emotional story with gender identity. There's all of these things at play that I think make, outside of the game moves we're making in season 47, make the characters really interesting and fun to invest in, where you have people that you don't like, you have people that you love, and it gives you a firm rooting interest in our stories. 45, like you mentioned, even with a steamroll in the Reba 4, you have sort of a really compelling dynamic because we watch this relationship between Austin and Dee develop throughout the show. And how is that going to cloud his or her judgment when you get down to the end of the game? We're not sure. Is Dee going to choose Julie or is she going to choose Austin? Is Austin going to choose Dee or is he going to choose Drew? Which pair of the Rebas are going to be able to pull Emily? And does Emily finish off her story as like that kind of the Andy arc where she is the easy first out that survives and gets new life and makes a run? Those storylines make it interesting. And the one thing that I will say about season 48 that I think has fallen flat to viewers is that the storylines have been very similar throughout the entire season. Joe and Eva, we knew what their dynamic was episode 1, and it was awesome on episode 1. It was awesome in episode 4 when they have their emotional moment at the challenge. But that relationship hasn't changed. Their position in the game hasn't changed. They still have power. They still have safety. They still have utility and equipment to protect them. And so I think viewers are waiting to watch it change. Like, what happens if Joe goes home? Now Eva is compelling. I want to see Eva have to flounder without Joe in the game. I think that's interesting. Kyle and Camilla, we've seen this sort of, hey, it's the two of us. We're this hidden duo. And every episode we're told we're working together and nobody knows we're working together. But where has the payoff been in a move that has actually shaken up the game? We're finally starting to get Kyle dealing with this push and pull of like, am I with Camilla or am I not with Camilla? But I think that is where viewers are frustrated, is that we're not getting the Mitch arc and the Mitch story or Star's story out there. We didn't get Chrissy's story out there. We've been told the same storylines and they're not developing or evolving or changing in a way that makes Survivor unique.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I think that is the biggest problem, because I've been saying over and over for the last couple of weeks, there is nothing inherently unlikable about any of the 6 people left in the game. And there was nothing inherently unlikable about the final 7 or the final 8. And honestly, there's a lot of people who hated David, almost like it was, let's latch on to somebody.
David was one of the most interesting people. Yeah. I thought David's dynamic and his story on the show was actually really entertaining and fun to watch. So like, I get why people maybe were like a little rubbed the wrong way at times, but I loved having David in the game.
And it's been hurting since he's gone. And I think that you have Joe and Eva, who have one of the most unique storylines you're ever going to see. And I was lucky enough to go to the premiere in New York when CBS did that. And I sat right behind them and I had no idea what I was about to watch. And I was sitting right behind them. And to watch that on screen and watch how they interacted with each other there, it's like, this is real. This is human. This is awesome. Like, this is beyond the game. And you sit there and you say to yourself, all right, think about these other beyond the game type relationships we saw on day one, Amanda and Todd, right? Like we even saw, like, it wasn't day one, but like Tyson and Jervis, these 2 guys where like, why would they be the guys? And then all of a sudden that's what runs the game for all of Blood versus Water. Like, nobody had that on their bingo card. And so you see this and you say, okay, what's going to happen? And then you get to episode 4 or 5, whichever episode it is. And you go, wow, okay. Everybody, I mean, my wife will, attest to it. I was crying on the couch. Everybody's got some sort of emotion to what's taking place there with Joe and Eva in that moment. And since that moment, nothing has happened with their arc. And I think that's tough, because it's not Joe and Eva's fault necessarily. Maybe they're really giving nothing, right? Maybe they really are just sitting there being like, Eva, I got your back. Joe, whatever, no problem. But there is nothing about why aren't we voting this person out? Well, how would Joe feel if we voted out Eva? We can't do that. How would Eva feel if we voted out Joe? That's why we can't do that. We're not getting those sound bites. And that's making it very, very, very difficult to continue to attach to them, because I don't know. I know I like them because I've seen them be heroes. I have seen that moment. I have seen a moment, and that's the most emotion I've had. But then you think about what Kyle's getting. And you look at Kyle's arc of talking about his story on day one, how him and Camilla bond, the way he bonds after Thomas's vote out. And now you hear him talking about, how he was arrested and all that. And then in this last episode, we get more about, I can't vote Joe out because this more. And you say, where's that with Joe and Eva? Look at this arc that this guy has. And I think that's what's made this season hard, because Joe and Eva have been dominant in terms of just consistently like being on top and never looking to be overthrown. And yet there's been no development now for 5 or 6 episodes. And that just gets really stale.
It's also interesting, like Joe and Eva, I think we have been shown over the last 2 episodes some of their blind spots as game players and as a duo, right? They seem sort of blissfully unaware of the tension about voting one of them out, right? Like everybody on that island is talking, is tonight the night that we take a shot at Joe? Are we taking out Joe? Are we taking out Joe? Are we taking out Joe? And it seemed as if until Mary said the word out loud, Joe, I'm voting for you, there was absolutely no sweat down either one of their backs. And so I think it's interesting that the power players in the game who are kind of running things, who are calling all the shots, who have all the ammo, in the form of advantages, are also the players that are maybe not as in tune with what's going on in the game around them. Because I agree with you. I think it would be a really interesting confessional, Eva's perspective on the heat that Joe is taking right now, and to watch Eva deal with, what am I going to do if they turn on Joe and vote out Joe? Can I do this game without Joe? I think that's compelling. But we haven't gotten that confessional because I don't think Eva is aware that Joe might be going home or that people are thinking about making a move against either one of them. And, every time they speak, it seems to be, we're confident. We feel good about our group. And as long as they're proven right, sure, credit to them, right? They've been confident in their group and their group hasn't let them down. That up to this point, they're definitely doing a lot of things right. That's the other unfortunate but interesting thing about the season is that lack of moves are usually because the people who are playing from the top are playing so well and they're masking their relationships better than we think from watching through the screen at home. And that is what I think is kind of not being shown. And that's another thing that I wish we would see, right? Why is Mitch under the idea that he's in with Joe? Like, why is Mitch not wanting to make this move at the final 8? Does he think he's with them? What is his perspective and what has Joe done to make Mitch feel that way? Shaheen clearly thinks he can beat Joe, but why does Shaheen feel that way? Go a little bit in depth. Is your plan then to go with Joe and beat him? And I don't know if we're having those stories fully told to us. And I'm not sure why that is. Is it lack of awareness on the players giving us those moments as storytellers in confessional, or is it just choices in the editing bay?
Yeah. We have a philosopher in here named Gabe Ortiz who says, sit at the top of the mountain too long. The fog around grows stronger and stronger. There you go. Gabe hit me with what's that from? Did Gabe come up with that? Is this like something Gabe comes up with on the spot? Or
I haven't heard that one. So that could be straight from the dome, but
that could be straight from him.
I think Gabe's somebody who can speak to that too very well, like for firsthand experience, that the more rounds that Gabe went on 47 running the merge tribe without anybody making a move on Gabe, I think Gabe's logical brain went to, these people are probably going to vote me out pretty soon. But the more it worked, the less you allow yourself to believe that, the more you're kind of like, wait, I'm actually doing this thing and I'm cooking. And it gets your defense down just enough.
Yeah. And I think the biggest frustration, at least it's my biggest frustration. I don't know if it's the same frustration other people have, but it's kind of what you were talking to. There's a disconnect right now of why does Shaheen feel one way, right? Like, why does he feel like he can beat Joe? Why does Kyle feel that sticking with Joe, other than the emotional attachment? Like, is he willing to throw away his game? What does Camilla think about that? Because Camilla doesn't have that type of relationship with Joe. She doesn't want to just take 6th place, right? And I think that's what's missing here. The story that we're watching doesn't actually make sense, right? We're being told over and over again, Joe's the biggest threat. Joe's going to clean up in a jury. Joe has all the power. Joe's an immunity threat. And then, by the way, we're not going to vote him out just because of emotion. But the only one who is actually saying the emotion aspect is Kyle. We're not hearing that from Camilla. We're not hearing that from Mitch. And we're not hearing that from Shaheen. So if we're not hearing it from them, is that how they're all feeling? And if it's not, what is the reason they're keeping Joe? What I personally think it is I think they all think they can beat Joe because they see that the jury's bitter over there. And they also know that New School Survivor, sitting around being likable, generally gets you Owen. It generally gets you Sue. It generally gets you Jake. It generally gets you like any of those people, like Romeo. Xander, like all of those people are 0 vote finalists because in the new era, it doesn't matter how well liked you are by your cast, you lose. And I wonder if they're sitting there. Mary said in Exit Press this week with Gordon Holmes, I would have voted for Shaheen at this point when he made that confessional over Joe, which kind of blows my mind. But if that's the story, why is Joe being protected in this way? And maybe protected is the wrong word, but why are we being led to believe that he is all powerful?
Well, I think that's the perception of the people in the game, right? Like I tend to believe that the most truthful thing you can possibly hear from Survivor players is what they're saying in the game, in their confessionals, or on the island, right? People talk in Exit Press, and newsflash, people lie in Exit Press all the time. People have sort of distorted views of reality after the game once they're privy to all the information. And I think it can be difficult as a player coming out of the game once you have all the information to kind of go back into the headspace that you were in when you were playing Survivor in the moment. And so I tend to think that the players in the game do view Joe as all powerful, but I would agree with you, Phil. Joe is not my winner pick right now. I would actually be shocked if Joe won this season. And the reason is the storytelling that you brought up. Because if Joe wins season 48, this season should be like Boston Rob on Redemption Island or like Tony on Cagayan. And it should be Joe talking about how he's got everybody saying trust, loyalty, and strength, and nobody's coming for him. And he's the godfather because he's playing like it and people are treating him like it. They're so scared of him, they won't even take out Eva. Like that is the level of power and emotional connection that all of these people seem to have to Joe. So why are we not being shown that? Why are we not being shown the impact that Joe has on Mitch? Well, either it's because he doesn't finish the job or because there's a lack of intentionality on Joe's part. You know, like we could see him get there and not even realize that he's had this type of impact on people, not be able to own this super dominant game. Where when Boston Rob is doing Redemption Island, he's looking at the camera. He's telling you what he's doing. He's telling you how he's controlling the people on the island with them. And then we watch him go do it, right? And if Joe isn't aware that that is the effect he has on people and that is the level of control he has over the rest of the people on his season, then it could explain why the storytelling fails to include that part of it. Or, like I said, the storytelling is leaning into a different narrative in order to highlight who our winner ends up being. I'll give you that theory later on.
No, we're going to get into that kind of like right now because so Blake, who I've been podcasting with, we do a show on Thursdays called Digging Deeper. Blake is the guy. He goes to Texas and now he's a sports fan. You know, he goes.
Blake
to
is the guy that said Rachel had absolutely no shot to win the game.
Yes.
Based off of her. I saw that.
Graphic designers are useless on Survivor. What good is that going to do?
I sent that to Rachel. Don't worry, Blake.
Yeah, exactly. and trust me, Blake took the heat there. And I made sure, I think even at the start of that finale, when he wasn't on the podcast with me, I set it up so that I could just roast him. I think we clipped him saying that, and that's how we started the podcast. But just because, you know, again, here's your sports. He goes to Texas UT. Now he's a sports fan. He loves the Longhorns, right? But this is the kind of guy he is. So I told him I was going to blow up his spot and I was going to bring it up to you because I know you're a big sports guy. I know you work in sports. I know you don't work in gambling, but you understand how lines work, right?
Yeah.
So I told Blake, I said, what are the percentage chances you think Joe wins? Because he is just all in. And he gave me his percentage. And I said, look, I'm going to let you change that. I want you to base it on, if you're a sports book, what percentage chance would you give him? His answer was 97.4% chance, which, Sam, if you are calculating that as an odds calculator, if you want to know what the money line on that would be, it is minus 3,745, meaning you have to bet $3,745 to win 100. If you're the sports book, you fire Blake immediately, right?
Yeah. Yeah, immediately.
So now
let me with those odds, factoring those odds in, I'm also getting a ridiculously good price on 5 of the other players still in the game, and I'm probably betting all of them and then winning
just
money.
Hoping Joe doesn't win. Like I said to him, I said minus 3,000 is you're up 2 touchdowns with the ball with 4 minutes left, and the other team has 1 timeout. That's minus 3,000, right? So his second highest odds, and I want to go here because I think this is where you were going. His second highest odds were 1.6%. Meaning that you could bet $100 to win $6,150 on Kyle. Would you take that?
I would take that. That wouldn't actually be my pick, but I would take that for sure.
Who is your pick?
So I think Kyle's a great choice. I think Kyle is it's a coin flip for me. Watch Camilla.
That's who I think too. I'm not out. Kyle's my winner pick, but I'm not out on Camilla.
And here's the Camilla thing for me. I think I disagree with the label that has been placed on this jury by the players in the game. Kyle had a confessional a few weeks ago talking about how he thinks the people on this jury will respect like loyalty and they won't respect people who are turning on one another and, you know, doing all this backstabbing. And I couldn't disagree more. Like, I think let's look at who's on the jury. Okay. Cedric voted for absolutely anybody and everybody he could, showed no loyalty to anybody pretty much the entire time he was out there. Chrissy, the captain of the screw this strength and loyalty thing, I want to make a move, all the way out on her way out the door when she's saying big mistake, cost somebody $1 million. David, who got burned by the strength and loyalty, we will ride together all the way to the end group. And now Star and Mary, people who have gone out kicking and screaming about why are we not making a move? I don't think this group wants to sit there and see the person who is, they want to see the status quo change.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes as a juror in Survivor, you vote against the status quo because that is your one chance to change the status quo. And if you feel powerless in the game, like Mary did, like Star did, like Chrissy did, maybe you can take that power back by changing the status quo through your jury vote. And actually, the comparison that I made for like a Camilla is like Sandra Diaz Twine in Heroes versus Villains, where Sandra stands up there in front of all of these heroes and says, "You let Russell get here, you idiots. I tried to tell you. I tried to work with you the whole time, and I was with you, and I had relationships with you, and I never excluded you, and I tried to work with you." And Rupert sits up there and says, "You know what? You're right. I don't want Russell to win. I don't want Parvati to win. They're villains. You're not a real villain, Sandra." And she wins the game doing less than Russell and Parvati do on paper because she was a change of the status quo. I think Camilla, based on what we saw from the jury, walking into tribal council with that immunity necklace around her neck, and everybody's kind of smiling and a little bit giddy, like, you did it. Like, who wouldn't vote for? If I'm Mary, if I'm Star, if I'm Chrissy, and this season was all about the big, strong bros getting together, and little old Camilla is winning immunity necklaces and getting to the end and foiling their plans, hell yeah, I'm riding and writing her name down. You are the change in the status quo. So I don't know if she gets there. It's going to be hard when the numbers get thin for her to get there. But if she can sneak in, I think everybody is going to be overlooking Camilla. I think this power group, I think they all think they can beat Camilla, and I think she's the one that like surprises them at Final Tribal.
I could see that for sure. And Blake gave her less than 1% chance to win. So you'd be getting plus 10,000 odds, meaning you bet
Sure.
100 and you're taking 10 grand home. And then you can build your shrine to yourself in the front, just like you want. I want to throw up some of these. Jordan Alexandria says, "I've been saying that Camilla's Sandra 2.0. Zach says, "Sam is freaking cooking holy ... here." And Roy Jolly says, "Sam, you're making so much sense. I hate it. I want Joe to win." I have been saying for this whole season, I don't see Joe as the winner. And I still think Kyle would be favored over Camilla. But when people were starting to call Camilla Purple Camilla and stuff, I'm like, since when? Because she had one confessional in an episode. We're still getting her thoughts with Kyle. It just might not be directly to us.
I don't think, well, and that's part of the reason I like Camilla actually as like a potential winner as well. It's because I don't think she's purpled. I actually think Camilla, for somebody who has demonstrated very little agency in the post-merge, her sort of like her point of view has been, Kyle's giving me the information and I hope Kyle can protect me. And she's trying. She's just like desperately like, somebody make a move with me. But she hasn't been able to get the numbers together. But I think surprisingly, we've seen a lot of Camilla's perspective while she hasn't had the power to do those moves. Like Star didn't have agency because she didn't have allies. We didn't really see Star ever. We didn't really see Mary much in the post-merge either until she was like about to go home. So these players that have had Chrissy, right? Like people who have had very little control of their own destiny. I think the show has kind of chosen not to show us their stories, except Camilla. Camilla is still relevant for some reason to the storytellers that are making this show. So I don't know what that reason is, but it could be because she's the one person that they're forgetting, you know, and they're not realizing how they're coming across to the rest of the jury.
Yeah. And I think that last week's scene between Kyle and Camilla of, I at least want one of us to make final 3. I know this isn't that crazy of a take because we're at final 6, but like one of those two will sit at final 3 at least.
And yeah, I think that's very likely, right?
Right. And I feel like whichever one of those two sit there, I think they're probably favored over the other people in this game. Like Shaheen might have an outside chance, right? But it's going to come down to how has Shaheen built relationships with the other people out there? I don't know because I haven't been told what Shaheen's done from a relationship standpoint. That would be the difficult part for him.
It's a great point on Shaheen because I think there was a lot of discourse this past week about Shaheen and his resume, right? He's very confident in his game, very confident he can beat Joe. But why? Like, what has Shaheen done that would separate him from Joe? I think in his head, his relationships, that's his final tribal speech right
Yeah.
there. The fact that he had Mitch, the fact that he had Star, the fact that he had Mary, he thinks he has a great relationship, and he does with Camilla. He's just not what Kyle is for Camilla right now. But I think that is Shaheen's story that he's planning to pitch at the end. We don't know how viable that is because we haven't heard that from the other people in the game, right? Like, does Mitch feel really tight with Shaheen right now at the final 6? Maybe, but like, I haven't heard Mitch say that. I've heard Mitch kind of just be like, I want to make a move. I'd like see who I can do it with. So I think that's hard. And that's probably why I have Shaheen lower in my winner rankings, probably 4th. I would have him out of the 6 people left, only because I think we would see a little bit more emphasis on Shaheen's relationships if that was the story that we were being told.
So you have Joe as a better winner chance than Shaheen?
Yeah, I think, so I think based on the storytelling, right, I think it's most likely to be Kyle or Camilla. But I don't think it's impossible for this to end up being like Sandra is one end of it where I just said where people voted against the status quo to demonstrate agency. And then there's Tyson, who like votes everybody out on Blood versus Water, and Aris and Vetus and Hayden and like Laura Moret are going to the jury talking about how if you don't vote out Tyson, Tyson's going to win the game. And they're pissed. And then Tyson gets to the end and they say, we told you so. Like, we told you he was going to get to the end, Jervis, and we told you he was going to get to the end, Monica. And now neither of you get to win because you let Tyson get there. Yeah. And so I think that there is a world where Joe gets to the end and there are enough people on the jury that say, we told you, you didn't listen. Now we're giving Joe the $1 million.
Yeah, no, I think that that's very reasonable too. I think my biggest disappointment would be if Joe were to win. It's not Joe. I feel like there needed to be a better story for Joe, right? Because when you think about the best winners in Survivor history, a lot of times who people will put at the top is just because their story made the most sense, right? You got it so clearly. Like Kim and Rob's, yes, those are very dominant games. But then when you go and you look at some of these other winners who are considered to be like great winners, like Jeremy Collins and I don't know, like I'm just going to use the 30s as an example, but like Jeremy and Sarah are considered better winners than Michelle and Adam and Ben, at least for their first seasons or for the seasons that they won. And I sit there and I'm like, Michelle and Adam and Ben played great games. They just did it in a way that wasn't as obvious to us as viewers, right?
Yeah.
And so because the stories weren't told as well, somebody here just said JT. We also have Tom. Like Tom Westman winning, JT winning, those are very satisfying conclusions. For some reason, Joe doesn't feel satisfying here.
JT is very different for me because I don't think there was a lot of people in the game on Token Teens that were saying, if you let JT get to the end, he's going to win. We have to take JT out. Everybody wanted to play with JT because they loved JT so much. Like JT is Kim. Kim was so lovable. Everybody loved Kim. Everybody wanted to work with Kim. Nobody wanted to make Kim unhappy. You knew you might lose to Kim, but you were just so enamored with who Kim was that you like that she ran things. I think Joe is a little different where people do love him. They do have an emotional connection to him, but the people who are not in his alliance are very, very frustrated by how safe he is. And so that is I think Tom is a decent comparison to Joe's game a little bit more. But that is like the Tyson to me of everybody who was against Tyson was so against Tyson, and yet all of them voted for him at the end because there was no doubt in their mind who the most dominant player was.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I look at Joe, like I like Joe. I wonder if Joe were to win, how did they not make this guy with what we saw in the first 5 episodes of this season, one of the most like unanimously loved winners? Now, granted, you're never going to make the internet happy. I learned that like early in the season, I was too positive. Then I got too negative. You know, it's one of those where like the internet's always going to be mad at you. But just talking in general, when you have these conversations, when you go to the Ron Clark event, when you're talking to these humans, Joe is not getting that like universal, I'm rooting for Joe, which is kind of crazy to me if he were to win the game. Like if he wins the game, this is the Captain America type winner that we have not seen in a very, very, very long time. Because even Tony doesn't fit that. Like Tony's a convict. Okay. He might be a cop, but like he's got that aspect of like, he's all over the place. He's not your Captain America pure hero like Joe is. And I think it's just weird.
Jeremy, right? Like, probably. Is Jeremy the last one? I mean, like Chris Underwood fits the demographic description, but the way that he won the game was just very out there. And Tommy is a little bit more of like a nerd archetype than he is into like the Captain America archetype. So I do think, it would be, I agree with what you said. And like my general rule on editing, when you're watching the show is I think Survivor they want the viewers to be happy with who wins. Like they want it to be satisfying, and whatever story that they tell, it's the story of what happened. It's the story of all these people, but they also want to tell a story to the audience that's going to make people feel good inside about how the game ended. And if you are creating a narrative on the show that is making more of your audience root against Joe than root for Joe, that's interesting for a guy who is totally lovable and likable and has played a relatively loyal game, has done some really like admirable things in the game and has played really well. I feel like that story might be a little bit different.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And speaking of that, when you're talking about edit and like how you felt before and after you played and everything like that, like, was there anything that stood out to you after you like rewatched 47 where you're like, oh, I almost feel like I'm watching this in 3D now? Like I'm watching this in HD, I guess is a better example than like standard depth. You're seeing something that maybe you didn't see before you played.
I just think it was always really fascinating to watch conversations that you were not part of. Like by the time that you finish the game, by the time you get out of the game, you talk to everybody from your season, you feel like you have an idea of everything that happened, even the stuff that you were unaware of in the moment. Like you're like, oh, this was cooking. This person had this going on. They felt this way. But to watch it unfolding right in front of your eyes, it is like, it's very trippy. It's very trippy because some of it is like you said, you're like, how did I not see that conversation that's happening right there at that hammock? That's very clearly important and looks very important. I was sitting 10 yards away and I'm like, they're probably just talking about what they want to eat when they get home. And you just kind of, excuse some of it in the moment. So that was the interesting thing for me. It was always, like just to see conversations play out in real life. It's like when you read a book that you love, and then a book becomes a really good movie, and you finally get to see like a real life, brought to life adaptation of the story that you've only been able to picture in your brain. And it's never exactly as you picture it. So it's always interesting to see how just how it actually looks on screen.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great comparison. And now here we are in season 48, and you're seeing those conversations, but you're not seeing them to the extreme that maybe it was happening in season 47. So I'd be curious when the season's all said and done, if there's anything that the cast from this season is going, man, I can't believe that happened. I never knew that. Like, because I don't feel like we're getting those very super important conversations as often on this season as we were in terms from a strategy standpoint.
Well, I think relationships are such a big thing too. Like I didn't mention that really, but like that was always very surprising. Here's the thing about Survivor players, and like everybody's got main character syndrome. Like everybody's going out there, you feel like you're the main character of the story. You're aware of your own strategy. You're aware of the moves that you've got cooking and the relationships that you have with everybody else. And you're like, me and so-and-so, oh, me and so-and-so are tight. We're like this, and you don't realize how close that person might be to somebody else in the game. I mean, I dealt with that. I remember I felt early on in 47 like Andy and I had a very, very good connection and a good relationship. And then I remember when we get to the challenge on day 3, the immunity challenge, Andy is having his moment where he's talking to Jeff and he's unraveling, and we're watching him unravel. And he says, I have only one friend out here. And I'm kind of going, no, Andy, don't out that we have a friendship, right? Like, don't out our relationship. And he goes, John. And all of a sudden I'm like, wait, do I not have a relationship with you now? Are we not good now? Are we not friends now? And I felt like, Andy and I talked after that, and I picked him up and we started to have a good relationship again. And I didn't even realize until I watched the show back how Andy and Saul too had some, like, they just had like a gravitational pull towards Rachel. And they had a really, really strong relationship there that I didn't pick up on in the moment on the island. And so when I'm making plays to save Saul at the final 10, in my head, I'm like, well, Saul and Teeny, like these people, they're just gonna like gravitate towards me and love me because I showed them that I care about them and I trust them. And none of it mattered because some people just have pulls to other or relationships that you didn't know they had working. And so then you watch the show back and you watch people talk about other people in confessionals and these private conversations that you weren't a part of. And you're like, wow, I missed that one. I missed that connection. And that's weird.
And if this season does become Kyle and Camilla, I feel like you're going to have a bunch of people sitting there going, how did we not realize how close these two were? Because Eva and Joe is so obvious. Everybody knows about that. But Kyle and Camilla, they're going to be like, you guys were number ones that whole time. I mean, all the way back to the Thomas vote. That was such a big moment. And it's like, it's very interesting. I also like that you went from don't blow us up to like, hey, screw you, man. You were supposed to say me. What the hell? Like, I like Andy.
But it's interesting though. It's like I bet you that's already happened, right? Like I bet you if we had honest conversations with people on the season 48 cast right now, there were some jaws on the floor looking at the level of communication, steady communication that always existed between Kyle and Camilla, because there's conversations happening all the time. Some of them are 30 seconds. And one of the things that I think is the most valuable attribute of an ally in Survivor is chemistry, and the ability to talk for 30 seconds, lock something in, communicate efficiently, and have enough chemistry to just be like, all right, we can walk away. And Kyle and Camilla have that, and not everybody has that. And so you might see them go to the water well, come back immediately, think nothing of it. And I think the amount of just the way that they're on the same page and that they're always coming back to one another and that they're always prioritizing one another, I think probably surprised a lot of the 48 cast as they watched the show back.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there. And somebody who didn't have that was probably David, who's constantly going around trying to confirm everything here and there. Hey, let's confirm this, let's confirm that. Before we get into the power rankings, what was your take on David standing up to honor Mary?
Incredible. Like, one of the best. I think it's an all-time moment on the show. I really do. Like, one weird thing about my brain, Phil, is I love history when we understand that history is being created in the moment. It was the coolest thing about Operation Italy when we were doing Operation Italy. And I think Andy and I both have this sort of like that level of our brain. And it got us really excited about the idea of doing the move together. Is we're like, if we do this, can we pull it off? Probably not. But if we do, we know we are doing an all-time Survivor moment right now in the moment. And it's crazy to think that we could be actively making history right now that people will talk about. That was really cool and like powerful for us. And I love when something happens and I see it for the first time and I just know we're going to be talking about that forever. And to me, it's like Coach doing his Tai Chi and his screams, and Philip wearing the feather to tribal council. It's David standing up on the jury bench is just, that will always be a moment for this show. I love it so much. And I think it's hilarious and iconic, and it's so David. So
and Jessica Lewis, I guess supposedly Roy Jolly says here that Jessica Lewis said that was a rule infraction. Is that still, did he break the rules by doing this?
I don't know. I wasn't on the jury.
Hey, we're gonna have to ask some people. We got. Where's Gabe? Gabe, get in here. Is that
get in here, Gabe.
I mean, I'm sure it will be now, because it does also signal right to the rest of the cast of like, this is how David is feeling, which could impact the way people ultimately play. But at the same time, when people are looking, you're looking at the jury, you see them shaking their heads, nodding, right?
I get the idea too. Like, rule infraction, whatever, probably not. And because they showed it. Right? Like, there's so much that happens at tribal council specifically that do not make the show. And they're very particular about what they do and don't put in the television show. And a moment like that, they did not have to cut to the jury when Mary is getting her torch. Mary could have gotten her torch, walked up to Jeff, said goodbye, and left. They chose to show that probably because they found it funny and found it to be a good character moment for David. So I don't think they're upset about it. If they're like, I've heard stories before about like people speaking at tribal council or saying things to players in the game and getting in trouble. And we don't see that on the show for a reason. So I don't think they're bothered by David.
Brendan and Tyson brought food on during Token Chains.
Yeah.
They brought food into tribal council
Yeah.
at Token Chains and got like berated. Tyson said it's the angriest he ever saw Jeff ever while playing. And they didn't air that. That wasn't. Yeah.
Players have told a lot of stories about like times that something went not great. Jeff got a little bit upset. It didn't make the show. So I think David standing up silently is the least of their worries.
Well, it made me laugh. Like when Say got voted out, she had like the one bit in one of the interviews where she said, if I made the jury, I wasn't going to vote for anybody. They couldn't have made me. And it's like, they could have. Like,
they could have.
Absolutely made you. No, like it would have happened. They would have taken your hand and they would have written out the letters of whoever you were voting for. So,
I mean, I would have loved to have seen that. I think one of my favorite jury like speeches ever is Randy in Gabon, where he gives Bob a question. Bob like botches the question. He gives Bob a second and third opportunity and goes, please, God, don't make me vote for Susie. Like I'm begging you, Bob, don't make me vote for and he's like, Bob starts to talk. He's like, nope, I'll take that. Stop talking. We're good. And it's one vote that wins Bob the game. So it's Randy right there. That would have been is like looking for anything to like an excuse to vote for somebody. It would have been funny.
Yeah, it would have been good. So, all right, let's jump into the rankings. There's only 6 people to rank, so getting 46 minutes in and having that's not a big deal. Who do you think the safest person this week is?
Eva. Yeah, I know everybody's saying Eva, but she's got all the trinkets.
She doesn't have safety without power anymore, though, right? That expired. I think that's what everybody said. Is it expired in episode?
Yes, true. So she has gotten a little bit less safe, I suppose, with the safety without power, but she's very capable of winning immunity. She still has the idol if she gets spooked. If somebody's going to make a move against her and Joe, I still think Joe, it's his head on the chopping block. I would not be worried about Eva coming short of the final 5.
I have Eva at number 1 as well, and my reason is kind of the same, but it's also, I think at this point, people want to sit next to Eva at final 3. I don't think anybody is worried about Eva beating them at final 3.
I agree with that. I think that's another thing that we're not seeing right now. But it's a duo, and who's the last person, Phil, that had a very public idol / advantage like this and was not targeted?
Oh my God.
There's a name that comes to mind. New era name
that. Sue.
No, Sue's wasn't public, actually.
We didn't know about Sue's. And it was Carolyn's. Was Carolyn's public?
I don't know. So the name that came to mind for me was Xander.
41's the worst season ever. I don't think about that.
Yeah, Ren says it in the chat, though. Like, I remember watching 41 and screaming, like, why is nobody coming after Xander? He has this idol. We're seeing him being in control. And then you got to the end and Xander didn't get any votes, and people were a little bit confused why Xander didn't get any votes. And then you come to find out the people in the game were just never really worried about Xander. And I feel like Eva might be similar just in the sense that when you have somebody who's a very clear duo and has all of this stuff, all of these trinkets to play and all of the advantages, and people are seemingly unbothered by it, there's probably a reason that we're not seeing. And I don't know what that reason is, but it very well could be that they just aren't worried about her as a final tribal threat.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Only Caroline knew about Sue's idol then, right?
Yeah, Carol, and then Sue tells Rachel towards the end of the game, but Caroline is the only one that knew. Yeah,
that's why I thought that one was more public knowledge, because I felt like she was telling so many people. But anyway, so I also also with Eva, they're not gonna drag Eva through the dirt in the edit if she's going to be like a 0 vote finalist or something, right? Like, they didn't drag Carolyn. They didn't really drag Sue. Like, there's no reason to. Like, they used to do this thing where if you were a 0 vote finalist, they kind of like crapped on you. I don't feel like they do that as much. They kind of make it silly. They kind of make it like you don't realize your mistakes, whatever. If they're willing to feed Eva, who has advantages everybody knows about and is really close with Joe, and they're not even bringing up her name. When Joe won immunity, they didn't say, oh, let's vote out Eva. It was like, okay, well, I guess we're going to get rid of 2 of the other people on the bottom. Eva's not going to get jury votes. And I think, like, there might be some from the audience who are like, well, she's the first autistic player, and like that's what happened, and they had that big moment and everything. I don't really think the cast at this point, this deep into the game, cares. And like the whole point is like, don't treat Eva differently. And if Eva's not playing the best game, I think that's kind of how people are going to view it at the end of the game.
Well, I don't. I mean, if you're a player, are you worried more about Joe at the end or Eva at the end? I think you have to be more worried about Joe. Like, you're always going to be more worried about the player that's seen as the dominant force, strategist, or just social force in a duo. And when we hear players talk about Joe and Eva, when we hear Kyle talk about, I can't vote against them, he's not saying I can't turn against Eva. His tie is I don't want to vote against Joe. That is the real sticky point for him. When David is worried about Kyle and the Kyle Camilla duo, David goes to Joe. We see Shaheen feel comfortable enough with Joe to wake up Joe when Eva walks away from camp. Like, I think Joe is everybody's person. And because Joe's everybody's person, he's the more dominant player out of the two of them, at least front facing to the rest of the players in the game. So if you're thinking about one of them as a jury threat, I think your brain is going to think of, I have to get Joe out before I have to get Eva out.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think a lot of people are probably seeing Eva kind of under Joe's wing. And then you turn around and the women, we've heard like she doesn't get along with the women. She'd rather play with the guys. She loves the strong guy alliance thing. The jury now, though, is Star. It's Mary. It's Chrissy. And if you send Camilla over, there's 4 women over there. There's 8 votes. If she's not bonding with them, she might end up sitting next to the people who would have ended up voting for her in the end. Like, Joe votes for Eva if Eva sits at final 3 and Joe doesn't, right?
Eva can get a lot of jury votes if Joe leaves the game.
Yes, that's a good point.
Joe and Joe needs to leave the game soon. I'll say that much as well. Based on my experience and kind of what I've been told about how Ponderosa sort of works, right? I don't think it's good to have your ally be the first juror, be the mayor of Ponderosa, because your ally that should be riding for you doesn't see enough of the game to really advocate for you, right? They don't see your entire post-merge. And so like just because your ally's the first one there, I don't know how much influence they really have over convincing people why they should vote for you. You also don't want your number one person to be 4th place and lose in fire. If your number one person goes out right before the end, they don't have enough time to really unpack the things that have happened over the course of the game with the jury to advocate for you. I think when you have somebody that goes home in that 7th or 6th place, and they're right in that like sweet spot where they played into the end game, but they're also at Ponderosa for 3 or 4 days before final tribal council, talking to everybody else about what a great game you are playing. That is how you can swing people over to your side. And I think the person that will do that for Eva is Joe. And so if Joe goes out at 6 or maybe even 5, right? If he is one of the next few people to come out of the game, Joe might go over to that jury and tell people, Eva's so much smarter than you think. Eva has so many great ideas and she helped me. You think I did stuff? That girl did all the, and that is what can win Eva the game. But I don't know, like, does Joe get out next? I don't know if he's been like, but if Eva's sitting next to Joe, like, you need an advocate, and I don't know where her advocate is.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Jordan Alexandria says, case in point, Tiffany from 46 for Kenzie. It's a great example.
I mean, Caroline was that for Rachel on our season. Like, Caroline was such a fan of Rachel, was really like, you know, in the game, loved Rachel and was working like this with her, knew the ins and outs of Rachel's brain, and then went and was stomping for Rachel at, you know, and you need that advocate there. And like my person, like that I was banking to do that with Sierra
for you.
Well, yeah, but like Sierra got there and she was there at like the first person on the jury. And for a while she's like, well, I'm rooting for Sam. But at some point, people are bringing in more information that is changing your opinion on the game and what's been going on. And you can't weigh in on any of those conversations because you weren't part of those conversations.
Yeah, back-to-back seasons of very weird, like, look how close these two people didn't vote for him. Didn't happen with Maria, with Charlie, and then with you and Sierra. It was like, God, we all thought you guys were in a showmance, right? That's what everybody on the island thought. And then it's like, but she didn't even vote for him at the end. It's just funny. Funny that was left in the end so heavily too for a 7-1 loss. I don't know. It's just weird. Funny.
Ponderosa is weird, man. It's weird.
Ponderosa is weird. I forget where I was going to go with it. It was something with Joe and Eva, but when you're talking about like Joe needing to get over there, I also wonder at this point. So what are they on day 24, 23, right? Something like that.
Yeah, 23 probably.
So if they're on day 23, and I'm saying this like kind of as a joke, but pretty seriously too, Joe gets voted out at 6. The first night is Joe and David yelling at each other. That's what that's going to be. And so I think that does cut away from Joe being able to fend for Eva. Now all of a sudden you're down to 2 days where Joe can really get in and say, no, this is what should happen. But maybe that final 5 person is actually the one who has the bigger say, or it's Mary, but Mary's not really close with anybody at this point. So I don't know who Mary would be advocating for.
No, I really think if it's Joe at the final 6, like I think whoever goes at the final 6 here, or at least if it's not Mitch, right? If it's Mitch, I think we punt one more. But I think like whoever the first person to go out of this power group, for that first person to go to the jury is going to have a ton of influence on that jury, right? Like if Joe is the first person to go, like Mary doesn't know what was going on in those majority 4 alliance conversations. Star doesn't know. David kind of knew, but Chrissy didn't know. Cedric didn't know. Like that person is going to be able to dictate the perception of the majority group and the players still in the game a lot. And so I think it's a case in point where whoever it is, you want them to be an advocate for you for sure. This is a critical time for that.
I'm excited to see how your rankings go because I do feel like Survivor 48 might be like the 0-16 Lions where there's a lot of punting and there's going to be at least one more before this all ends.
Yeah.
But we'll see where your ranking goes here as we go through. Who do you have at number 2?
I have Kyle at number 2. I think, I feel good about the Kyle Camilla duo here, staying relatively safe. But who's coming for Kyle right now? I don't know if anybody would come for Kyle. Like Camilla certainly is not. I don't think that's the move that Mitch has on his mind of like the big move that he needs to make. Shaheen, I think hypothetically could try to make a move on Kyle, but where are Shaheen's numbers coming from? Because I think Joe and Eva are far less likely to vote for Kyle than they are either of the other 3 people in the game. Joe would vote for Mitch before Kyle. I think he'd vote for Camilla before Kyle. I think he'd vote for Shaheen before Kyle. So I think Kyle, I have based on chance to win immunity and being kind of off the radar of everybody else as well, I think is my number 2 player that is safe.
Yeah, I want to disagree with you, but I literally can't. Kyle is my number 2, but I do want to ask you, a couple quick ones here if immunity comes into play. If Joe were to win immunity,
yeah,
who is Mitch thinking to push to vote out? Because it would seem to us that Mitch would be the obvious boot there, but who do you think Mitch goes for?
That's fascinating. I mean, Camilla, right? Yeah, I think Mitch probably doesn't understand Camilla's relationship with Kyle and thinks he's more in with the guys than he actually is. And so if Joe is off the table, I think Mitch's move is go to Joe, go to Kyle, go to Shaheen and say, okay, well, we all, us 5, the power 5, we've been 5 strong the whole game, right? The 5 of us, let's all just vote out Camilla. So I think that's probably where he's at.
And then if Mitch wins immunity, do you think that they would vote Joe? Or does this try to turn to Camilla and Kyle now has to play against? Because that's what I'm trying to figure out as I'm doing this, because we both have a very basic 1-2. But when I start to think about the 3, 4, 5, 6, it seems like it would be obvious Mitch and Joe would be at the bottom. But if Mitch wins immunity, who does this group
if Mitch wins immunity, I think it's chaos, because I think the natural move would be for this majority alliance to push on to Camilla, which obviously is not going to go with Kyle. And at which point I think you will start to see Kyle and Camilla figure out what are our options other than voting out Camilla right here. Do we push on Joe? Can we get numbers on Shaheen? Does she feel safe enough to not play her idol? And I think that's when they really start to try to have to cook. But if you get caught cooking, it's really, really bad for both of them. So that would be the chaos scenario. Mitch wins immunity at 6.
Yeah, because I'm basing my power rankings on today, Mitch not winning immunity. But if Mitch were to win immunity, That's crazy. And I'm just trying to think, like, who should I put? Like, if I'm putting Joe at 5 and putting Mitch at 6, which, like, probably what I'm going to do, but I haven't totally locked this in, but that's probably what I'm going to do. I'm trying to figure out, though, like, who would Mitch think is the option? Because even last week, when we see Joe getting really mad, being like, we got to throw a vote at somebody else so I don't go home. And they're like, well, Mitch is like, what do you want to do? Me? And then Shaheen's like, you're not doing me. It's like, Joe's not realizing that, but like Joe, part of him is probably like, yeah, Mitch, we should do you. So if you're Mitch, like, are you getting paranoid about that situation? I'm very curious who Mitch would try to put the target on. You're saying Camilla, which I think is probably right. But if Mitch were to win immunity, where would this whole cast say, we want to go now?
Well, the centerpiece to all of this to me is like Shaheen, and that's why I'm frustrated and it's hard to have this conversation because I don't think we've gotten. I don't know what the plan is for Shaheen. Like, is Shaheen, maybe he is, right? But is he really, really committed to going with the 4? Because he has also given us in confessionals the fact that he has this relationship with Camilla that he's trying to keep around as long as possible so that he can use it when he needs to use it. If Mitch wins immunity at 6, is that the moment that Shaheen is like, let me cash in on my relationship with Camilla, then do the 4 of them vote against Joe and Eva? Or is Shaheen really down to just pick off Camilla and hope Mitch doesn't win again and go with the 4? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know either. And that's a great question because it seems like it should be Joe because they're talking about Joe week after week after week after week after week. But if they're willing to keep Joe last week and vote out Mary, who felt like a non-entity, felt like no type of jury threat, felt like she had no legs in this game, then why would you vote out Joe here instead of, and I think Shaheen's my biggest question mark. I'm going to put Shaheen at 3 over Camilla just because in all of these scenarios, they're not actually saying Shaheen's name. Are they not seeing Shaheen as a threat or are they? Like, it's weird because Shaheen's name is not coming up now from the people who are left. They almost want to use him as their 3rd somehow.
That's interesting. So Shaheen, because to me, I almost have the same feelings about Camilla. I think these are the 2 that I would debate, right? Like I'm with you, right? Joe's probably gonna be 5 for me. Mitch is probably gonna be 6 for me. I have Camilla over Shaheen as being a little bit safer than Shaheen. And to me, it is because I don't see a world where Camilla is a primary target for really anybody unless Mitch wins immunity, right? Like the power group is always going to want to come after Mitch. And Kyle's not going to vote for Camilla no matter what. And I think that's a factor too, right? When you get to this tricky part of the game, if you at least have one person that is like, I will not vote for you, I think you are a little bit safer. Shaheen does not have that. Mitch does not have that, right? Like nobody is going to sit there and be like, we cannot do Shaheen. Absolutely not. But there will be somebody who does the same thing does that for Camilla in Kyle. I think people are going to try to use Shaheen as their 3rd, but I also think Kyle's going to try to use Camilla. If Mitch is going to make a move, Mitch needs Camilla. And Shaheen needs Camilla. Like Shaheen can't make a move without Camilla. I think he views his path to the end as also one that runs through Camilla. And there is a world where Kyle and Camilla potentially feel the need to, like, what if Joe wins immunity? That's a scenario where I think Shaheen can be in trouble.
You think that they potentially would vote out Shaheen instead of just simply going, let's get rid of it?
I think Mitch is still the likely option there. But right, Joe wins immunity. You're afraid of Eva's idol. But what if Kyle and Camilla, right? Because here's where I'm at with this, Phil. Kyle and Camilla have said one of us has to get to the end. Voting out Mitch almost ensures that one of you does not get to the end.
Yeah.
Because
how is immunity?
How is Kyle going to how is Kyle going to make the case at 5? So Mitch has gone at 6. All right, see you, Mitch. Now, anybody can win immunity. Kyle can win immunity himself for all we care at the final 5. How is he going to make a case to vote out somebody else and not Camilla when he's been preaching this 4 strong the whole way? That is in, like, if you're Camilla, you're probably like, Kyle, I know we can make 5, but I'm screwed at 5 if we don't try to make a move here at 6. If you keep Mitch in the game at 5, you have some plausible outs to get both of you to 4, in which case you guarantee one of you sits at the end. And so I think there could be a move for Kyle and Camilla to I think they want Joe, right? That is like the move that they want to make, or at least Camilla wants to make. I don't know where Kyle's at on that. And maybe they think we can make a move, get up both of us one step farther, keep Mitch as sort of an easy vote out at the final 5. And how do we do it? We have to vote Shaheen because both Eva and Joe are protected.
Yeah, so now that's a look, okay. I'm not going to get caught up in this again, okay? I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to get the false hope that Sam is spewing because for 2 weeks I've had false hope. But and it's not that I dislike Shaheen, so don't take that the wrong way of me being like false hope, but this feels like the smart move is Shaheen to go home. Because if you keep Shaheen, like, and I'm saying this, like, let's say Joe wins immunity. You're not going to vote for Eva because she has the idol. You might be scared of that. So now it seems like let's vote for Mitch.
I think it's the smart move for Camilla, right? Whether or not it's the smart move for Kyle, whatever.
Because Kyle does feel like he's going to the Final Four no matter what.
Because Kyle's good. Yeah, Kyle's going to the Final Four no matter what. And so you're shaking the status quo, risking yourself if you're Kyle for the sake of keeping Camilla. Maybe that's smart. Maybe that's incredibly dumb. But I think if you're Camilla and you're trying to guarantee as much, like I think the best Survivor strategy, this was my strategy when I played, at least especially early on. Vote now in a way that obviously is not me going home, but also protects me through the next vote. And so when we vote out John Lovett at the first tribal council, it was because Sierra and I had a conversation about the fact that I could get Andy to come with us and we could be a 3-2 over the other 2 girls if we vote John instead of Andy. Whereas if we vote Andy instead of John at the first tribal, John goes off with Annika and now we're at their mercy. Yeah. Right. So you're always trying to vote one step ahead and are like, how can I make sure that I'm good now and I'm good at the next one? When Sierra and I debated voting out Annika or Andy at our when we went at the 5th tribal council, I made a case to her where I said, look, I know that you are with me. I don't doubt you that you are with me. But if we vote Andy and we lose again, and it's us 2 and the 2 girls, there's no world where they don't vote me out. And I don't expect you to go to rocks to protect me in the pre-merge. And so you have to give yourself another out. And I think for Camilla right here, keeping Mitch in the game gives Camilla another out at 5. So if you can make a move on somebody who's not Mitch and keep yourself and Kyle in at 5, that is the best move for her to make sure she can get to 4.
I remember that episode so well because I literally made a TikTok or Instagram or something making that exact argument that you just made, where it's like people can say that getting rid of Annika was stupid, but Sam goes home or it's a tie and then Sierra doesn't have a choice but to vote for Sam, and like she's not going to risk her game at final 14 or whatever it was. But I think here, what's probably going to happen, and if you're Kyle and you think about it this way, I think Kyle probably beats everybody left in the game at final tribal. Okay, I do. I think he beats Joe. I think he beats Eva. I think he beats Mitch. I think he beats Shaheen. Maybe he loses to Camilla. That's where it could get interesting. But if you're Kyle, think about it this way. This week, Mitch loses immunity. You vote Mitch out. You know Shaheen, Eva, and Joe want to take you to Final Four. So you're at least getting a chance to make fire at 4 to sit in front of the jury. If you get to 5 and you have Camilla there, Mitch is gone, and Camilla wins immunity, do you feel that you have a better relationship with Joe and Eva than Shaheen does to get yourself to the Final Four? Because you know Camilla's voting with you. So you know, worst case scenario at Final 5, you have a 3-2 vote taking place against you. Do you have one more vote in the arsenal? Or do you go to Shaheen and say, Shaheen, you can't beat Joe. Eva's going to play her idol. Now's the time to vote Joe out of the game. If you're Kyle and you feel that way, you vote Mitch out 100% this time because you're not worried about Mitch going, because you know that every single person left in the game after Mitch goes home wants you to sit in the Final Four.
This is a fun. I'm very curious to see Survivor 48 play this stage of the game, because traditionally, and it was very clear for us on 47, Operation Italy happens at the final 7. We come back. The whole landscape of the game has just changed. The resumes of everybody involved have just changed. The alliances have been blown wide open. And from the final 6 on, I think it really became, you had a power ranking in your head of where am I in terms of jury threat? Who is for sure above me? Who is for sure below me? Anybody that's above me needs to go as soon as possible. And everybody sort of has that list of like where they would prefer to be. And I think that's sort of traditional thinking. Now, if we're going off that thinking, everybody in the game at the final six should want to keep Mitch around right now. Everybody would want to keep Eva around right now based on what we talked about earlier. But I don't know if this group thinks that way. I don't know if this group thinks about optimizing win path. And you know, where are you in the power rankings is also interesting, because if you're towards the top, maybe your only goal is get there, right? You're not, if everybody's below you, you don't care who goes, you just care about getting there. And that is what I find interesting about this group, because I think there's a lot of players that have themselves at the top. I think Shaheen thinks he beats anybody. I think Kyle thinks he beats anybody. I think Camilla thinks she beats anybody. I think Joe thinks he beats anybody. And because all of them think that they can win against anybody, they're more likely to just say, all right, Mitch, see ya. Yeah. All right, all right, Camilla, see, like, I think people care less. And so that's very, very interesting. Like, I think everybody will play self-pres mode more than they play aggressive, let me get there with the right group of people.
I think that point right there that you just made is enough of a reason to get me excited for Wednesday night's episode.
I think this will be a really fascinating episode regardless.
Because even if Mitch goes, what that tells you is the other 5 people truly think they win no matter what.
And that's fascinating for a finale. Yeah. Like that's an interesting end game if everybody thinks they can win. And it's like, I mean, what did I used the heroes versus villains comp earlier, but is that like, that's sort of what we got in heroes versus villains? Yeah. No, I mean, like Russell thought he was going to win. Parvati thought she was going to win. We've got the famous Sandra confessional where she says, I don't know about that. You've got Colby, the last hero standing, who I don't know if Colby wins that, but like, I certainly think he's got a chance with the amount of heroes that are for him. Like, yeah, he's got a lot of heroes. And so you end up with like a group of people who are at the end, and almost all of them believe they can win. I think Jerry was a little bit, had herself very high on that pecking order as well. So it makes for a fascinating end game and some puzzling decisions, and usually for a really exciting final tribal council when people are all over the map on where they see themselves. And when the hierarchy is a little bit less clear, it makes for interesting moves, because there is no standard move. Like there's no obvious right move to make, right? Like if you know this person's going to win the season if they get to the end, and everybody knows that, and everybody's on the same page about that, well, logic tells you have to make a move against that person. And then that's when you deal with the tallest poppy gets cut, and you're just never trying to be the tallest poppy, and you're always trying to cut the tallest poppy. But if everybody thinks they're the tallest poppy, everybody's making weird moves that don't make any sense.
Well, and that's what's really interesting, because obviously I understand why the last 2 weeks have frustrated a lot of people, right? It's like you vote out Star, you vote out Mary. It doesn't feel like either one of those should have been the move there because there's bigger threats. But like you're saying, if Joe thinks he can beat everyone and everybody thinks they can beat Joe, then they want to keep Joe, and that's good for Joe to keep the other. Like they don't have to think strategically about who should I get rid of. Because and obviously at the end of the day, we're going to sit here on May 22nd, and we are going to say, man, what a dumb move by this. You're going to hear all the exit press, and it's going to be, Shaheen, you finished second place. Don't you wish you would have voted out Joe? Or Kyle, don't you wish you would have voted out Joe? Or Joe, don't you wish you would have voted out Kyle or Shaheen? Like, we're going to get that. But that's every season of Survivor. And I think that that's the thing that kind of gets lost in the community sometimes, is like, there's always someone who can beat you, right? The Phantom Menace, there's always a bigger fish. As stupid as that movie is, there you go. There's always a bigger fish. Now, you need to figure out which person that is, and you might not realize who that person is. You might think it's somebody that it's not, right? Russell Hant's a great example. He thought it was Brett. He thought it was Jason. It was Natalie. If he goes to the end with Jason and Mick, he probably wins the season. Yep. And so you just miss, you're underestimating, you're overestimating, whatever. If you're Shaheen, if you're Kyle, if you're Joe, and you truly think you can beat everybody else, let's say that's the final 3 for argument's sake. If that ends up as a 3-3-2 vote, none of them are stupid. Even if that ends up as a 4-3-1 vote, none of them are stupid. Like, a lot can happen, as you know, at Final Tribal Council, and things do like wiggle, and you might lose a vote, gain a vote, whatever. But like, you get to that final tribal and it's close, or even if it's not close, but it's like there's arguments to be made, you might just not have realized.
Well, somebody's a genius, right? Like somebody's owed a huge apology, right? And like, I mean, if Joe wins, everybody has kind of seen that sort of like coming. But like, if we sit here 2 weeks from now and Shaheen beats Joe in a final tribal council, everybody owes him an apology for saying, "What are you doing? Not making a move. You're boring. You're dumb. You're all this stuff." No, you won the game, and he had a correct read on it, right? And so, like, if it is not a Joe win, I think that, everybody's going to be wrong. Somebody's going to be right. And like whoever ends up being right is the person that wins the game. But as you said, that is a challenge on every season of Survivor, pretty much ever. There is always a fundamental battle between how you are perceived by the other players in the game and how you believe you are perceived by the other players in the game, and where your story fits in line with their story. And if you don't have a correct read of that, you have no shot, and you've had no shot from the beginning. And you might have a perfect read on that. You might know exactly how you're perceived, but you might not know how somebody else is perceived. And that could be your killer mistake as well.
Yeah. And I think a good example of kind of that person who we might need to owe an apology to or anything like that, you mentioned them already once on this podcast, the taller, more muscular, more handsome, richer, more successful version of me, which is Tommy Sheehan. Everybody was like, what the hell is this guy doing the whole season? Yeah. He knew exactly where he sat with everybody, to the point that he was able to get Nora to take him the final 3, because he knew exactly where he sat. And it might be that Island of Those, you sit there and you say, oh my God, Tommy, please do something. He didn't have to. And I know people aren't exactly sending apology cards to Tommy and his family, but Tommy doesn't need them because he's got $1 million and he's hanging out, and he doesn't need those apology cards. He's fine. And I think that's where this season could go. You could get somebody who's been right week after week after week, and for 26 days was playing the strongest game that they could possibly play. And we're crapping on them because it's like, well, you didn't play the game I wanted you to play. You didn't entertain me. And it's like, well, I didn't need to. And you thought I was stupid because I wouldn't beat this person. I would beat that person. And Tommy to this day says, I beat Lauren. I beat Janet. I beat like he thinks he beat, he doesn't think he beats Janet, but he knows he beats Lauren.
Right. But that's why he makes the move on Janet, right? As soon as he knew that there was somebody he couldn't beat, he pulled the trigger and flipped and made that move. It's why Jeff says, like, every Survivor winner wins the game a different way, and there's no right way to play, because the key to every Survivor season is the culture of your season and the people that you're playing with and how you're perceived by those people. What do people want the season to be about? What do people want to represent their season of Survivor? And then how do you craft your story, either literally by your actions in the game, or with imagination and storytelling at Final Tribal Council? How do you craft your story to best complement that and to best fit that picture that everybody saw for their season? And sometimes you see a season like 48 that is not built on optimal strategic maneuvering the entire time, and there is less movement, and the winner is somebody who does have to do a little bit less, and they don't play super flashy, but somehow that can also be the perfect complement and summation of a season of Survivor. I'm not saying you have to like that as a viewer, right? It can make for less interesting television, but it does make for optimal Survivor gameplay. And, that is the definition of what a good Survivor player is flexible to one season and to one's group of people that you are with. And you make yourself fit into whatever box that is.
Yeah. And it's, as an audience, we try to find that balance between dominant gameplay, great winner, and also still a very interesting, fascinating season. Tony is the prime example of that, which is why even if Tony took 3 tries to win twice, people rank him ahead of Sandra every time, or almost every time, because it's like he was more entertaining. His seasons are a little bit more interesting because of the gameplay he's making. Pearl Islands is great, but like Tony is making the things happen in Cagayan, whereas a lot is happening around Sandra in Heroes, Villains, and in Pearl Islands.
But yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised how different the criteria is for everybody on the island of like what they look for in a Survivor winner. For me, my criteria would have always been active gameplay. Like I played as somebody who had a threat label on me from the moment I hit the beach. And because of that, I found my best option was playing as active as possible, causing as much chaos, making as many big moves, lying to people, flipping on people, doing all like the big flashy stuff to build a resume, because I kind of knew that I didn't have the opportunity to slide under the radar and be like number one social player. Like that wasn't the mold that I was supposed to fill for my season. And so if I was sitting on the jury and I saw somebody that was playing really active Survivor and was like really making stuff happen and had influence and was fighting for their life and was always doing something, never turning their brain off, that would have earned my respect.
Yeah.
And I was surprised to find out that most people didn't even feel that way. It was like, some people liked not making moves. They wanted to vote for the person who didn't make moves because that person showed restraint and didn't raise their threat level and was patient, and they like patience. Some people vote for the person they like the most. Some people vote for the person that has the fire in their eyes when they're out doing a fire making contest. Some people vote for who needs the money the most. And the same way that, Phil, you or I could go down the street and grab a group of 8 people that all watched the most recent season of Survivor and say, who would have won? Their count of votes probably is different from what the actual jury on the island would have voted for. Yeah. And that's true of any season ever, because people are very different in the criteria of how we define this game. And so the number one thing that a Survivor player has to do is identify what the other people around them value and think about in an ally, in a move, what they think about as a juror. And the person that does that the best is the person that wins the season, no matter what, every single time.
Yeah, I think that's great advice to anybody. I know 49's already out there, but if you're going to play 50 and you didn't win the first time, there's your advice from Sam. I think that's pretty solid. I think that's spot on. And I think that's what gets missed. And I think, obviously you're somebody in here said a Survivor historian. And like, I've watched this show since season 2. I've been dedicating 10 years doing this podcast, everything like that. We can get caught up in like, well, how do you not see it this way? Like, aren't we all in agreement that this is better? This is whatever. And it's just not true. I mean, and like, you have to think on this season, if you're Kyle, if you're Shaheen, if you're Joe to an extent, but Joe doesn't really love the game in the way that those two do. If you're Camilla, you have somebody like David sitting over on the jury who has openly watched maybe 7 seasons of Survivor, maybe. And if he has watched more than that, he only pulled things from 45 and 46, it seems like, right? And so when you look at that, you can come out there and you can say, I'm going to play this strategic game. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But if David's pissed at you because you stabbed him in the back a week too early and he's bothered by that, he's not going to vote for you. And there is nothing you can do about that. So you better figure out how you're going to get you're going to get 4 votes from somebody else. Right. And that's something to think about. And people can say, well, David's just bitter. Maybe. But also that's what David is valuing. And if you can't figure out how to get his vote, you got to figure out how to get the rest. Otherwise you're not going to win. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't know. This group is like wildly unpredictable. And part of the reason that it's frustrating that we saw so little of some of these jurors, I don't know Chrissy at all. I don't know how Chrissy thinks. I don't know what Chrissy values. I don't know how much of this game Chrissy has seen. I actually would have thought Chrissy was like an old school player that had kind of an old school mentality until like the week before she went home when she's complaining about people playing too old school. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize Chrissy was like a game bot, but here we are. So I don't know how to read this jury. Like, I know how Camilla's going to vote. I feel good that Camilla's going to vote for who she think played the best strategic game. Camilla's a Survivor nerd. She loves this game. Like, she's the super fan, right? I know that one. I don't know how Star is going to vote on that jury. I've got no clue. And so like, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Yeah. All right. So you're going Camilla 3, Shaheen 4. I'm going Shaheen 3, Camilla 4. Are we both doing Joe then Mitch? Is that how we're finishing this? Yeah, Joe then Mitch. I mean, it's the 2 names that are brought up, right? Like, yeah, Mitch's name actually is surprisingly not brought up all that often, but it's just like next guy down the line. If Camilla wins immunity again, if Kyle is really riding for Camilla again, I was actually surprised that Camilla's name was not on the radar of Joe. In the last episode, they're said Mary then Mitch or Mitch then Mary. I don't care. And Joe's talking about that, not around Camilla. And I was kind of like, oh, Camilla just got off
the radar all of a sudden. She was on the hot seat before David went home, and then now is all of a sudden not part of that group that's on the bottom. So I think Mitch is, if we get false hope again and it's another run of the mill steamroll, Mitch is the name that's going to go.
Yeah. And I think so. If Mitch goes here at 6, and then let's say Camilla does go at 5, and we get to Final Four, we're going to have at least 2 people, because I really, truly don't think Eva can win this game at this point. I think there's enough of an edit. I don't think there's enough of a story. I don't think there's enough gameplay there that she can win. Even if she plays, she'd have to play her idol very, very well here at Final 6 or Final 5 to make a move that nobody sees coming. But if she goes home here, and even if Eva is in there, if you have a Final 5 of Joe, Camilla, Kyle, and Cheyenne, no matter what, you're getting 2 people at that tribal council, that final tribal council, who you feel like can win as an audience. That's what we want as an audience, right? Like, we felt that we had it with you and Rachel. We felt that we had it maybe with Austin and Dee to an extent. Charlie and Kenzie, 100%. That's probably the strongest example of that in the entire new era.
Yeah, but you're also, a lot of the time it takes fire making though, right? Like it took me winning fire making. It took like Kenzie had to win fire making. Like if Kenzie doesn't win fire making on 46, it's Charlie sitting there with Ben and Liz, and Charlie probably wins soundly, like easy in that world, right? So sometimes it takes it. And I think what's funny about that is like you said, right? If that 4 goes to the end, or there is like a combination of that 4 at the end, no matter what, you're going to have 2 people that feel like they can beat each other, and the audience thinks maybe have a shot. Like it's not going to be going for a coronation when we go to final tribal council. It's going to actually be like a toss-up between a couple of players.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I can watch the edit enough. Like on your season, I was like, okay, Rachel's going to win this. Sam would have to pull something out, right? Like Sam would have to do something at Final Tribal. Normally, by the time we get to Final Tribal, I'm like, whatever. Like, let's speed through this, and like, let's just get to the reading of the votes. I felt like Rachel's going to win. I knew that Dee was going to win. That was just closer than I thought it was going to be. Jam had
that one. Yeah, that one was surprising.
Yeah.
Actually,
yeah. Jam was locked in. Gabler was shocking. That one for sure. Marianne dominated. And then Erica versus Deshawn versus Xander. The biggest problem there was the edit was so bad for all of for Erica, and really Deshawn too, to an extent, because he had been turned that villain turn, whatever it is. We'll talk about 41 another day, but it's like that made it so that by the time that final tribal came, I was like, I know Xander can't win, but I don't really care. This season, though, we are going to have, I really believe, 2 people sitting at that final tribal where I'm going, which one of them is going to win? Like, it is going to be a little bit of a, what did Jeff call yours? He said it was like a sword fight or something, where like the 2 of you were going back and forth, you and Rachel. We're going to get that. And a 7-1 doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bigger gap than a 5-3 all the time, right? It could just be like these 3 people were always going to vote this way. I always say that going back to Thailand, it's like the 3 people who voted for Clay were never going to vote for Brian, but the 4 people who voted for Brian were never going to vote for Clay. So it didn't matter. Like you knew what you were going to get going into that final tribal. I feel like with this season, there could be some back and forth between Joe and between Kyle and Cheyenne and Camilla. If 2 of them get to this final 3, that's compelling TV. And maybe this can lead to a Ghost Island type finish, where when you know what's coming, maybe you get more excited about it on a rewatch than we have been currently watching it live.
I could definitely see that, this being a better like binge season on a rewatch, when you can kind of, the week to week, when you know what's coming and then it happens, is kind of like it can make it stale over the course of a month or whatever it is. But when you can whip through it in one night, and then by the next night you've got compelling Survivor back on your TV, it can make a season play a lot better. I think you're definitely right. About that sort of dynamic in multiple people. Like it won't feel like a shoe-in. I don't think we are going to go to the 48 final tribal council and be like, yep, I know who wins. I know exactly what it's going to be. It's going to be a runaway. Now let's just whip through the questions and read the votes, Jeff. Like, there is going to be real votes on the line, and people who have some sorry feelings. I actually think this final tribal, because I think this is going to be a better jury, it's going to be all about how you own your stuff, really. Like, you have to show awareness of the game that you played. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, like, I do think Joe can win. I just don't think Joe can win sitting up there saying he played a loyal game the whole time, because David's going to say, no, you didn't. What happened when you told me you were riding with me, Joe? I didn't do anything to turn on you. You voted me out. You weren't playing loyal. Chrissy's going to say the same thing. Star is going to say the same thing. She's going to feel bad that nobody gave her a shot and nobody talked to her. These people are going to feel sour. And so to me, it's Tony. Like
Yeah.
Trish goes up to Tony, says, was it worth it on your dead brother or whatever to backstab me and win this game for $1 million? And he says, yes, it was. Straight up, I played the game. I know I lied. I know I had everybody under my control. I know that I didn't always do this, but I came out here. If I'm Joe, I came out here for my kids to show them that, you can do anything and that you can win this game. And I played the best game. Yeah, Joe can win with that, but it's going to be whoever tells that story most honest to the jury.
And I think Joe would have a hard time there, and we might not see it because Joe could be 4th place, Joe could be 5th place for sure. But I think Joe would have a hard time if David confronts him on that, because I think Joe would get defensive about his honor and integrity and all that, because that is how Joe carries himself through his regular life. But if he makes the argument of, well, David, you were running around and you were ready to turn on Kyle because of this whole Camille thing, all David has to say is, no, but I didn't act on it. I talked through it because that's what Survivor is. But I voted for Mitch that night. You voted for me. You blew up the alliance. I didn't do anything. And if that's going to be your argument, I'm not voting for you. Mary's not going to vote for him. Chrissy's probably not going to vote for him. Now, all of a sudden, Joe's sitting there. Joe's got 5 people left. That's it. And so that could be very, very, very difficult for him. And this is where, like, last week, I was a whiny little baby on the podcast, the recap podcast. I was just like, I'm so over this. I don't want to do this anymore. This is stupid. And I wish that this was more exciting. And a lot of it, I am blaming the edit a lot, because a lot of people are like, well, the players aren't doing anything. And it's like, if the players don't have to do anything. I'm fine with the steamroll season. Palau's a steamroll season. I enjoy Palau a lot. But guess what? They edited that so that you cared more deeply about everybody you were watching. I think, though, now that we've had time to move away from those last 2 episodes, even if Mitch goes here at 6, I'm fully invested in what's going to take place in this finale. And I think that's something you can't say every time you go to a finale.
Well, that's the interesting thing. That's Survivor, though. Like, that's why it's such a good show. It's why there's no bad season of Survivor. Like, 43, I think, is an electric season during the season. You're watching big threats get taken out, and like, you're watching this battle kind of go, and you're like, well, can Jesse really do it? And Jesse pulls off the big move on Cody, and then Jesse goes out, and it's this crazy push and pull. And the downside of that is that you end up with people who you're kind of like, I don't care if they win or not. And when you get to the end, 41, you were talking about that season, right? Is like, all right, well, there's Shan, there's Ricard. They're making some big moves. And Danny kind of seems like he's got some momentum as like the leader of his tribe and his alliance. And and all these players start going out. And then you sit at the end and you're not crazy about any of the options, right? And that can be the downside of fun episodes earlier, is that you don't have the fun episodes later. Ghost Island, say what you want about Ghost Island post-merge, one of the best finales ever. Like, the Dom and Wendell Final Tribal Council makes that season worth watching alone, because it's so compelling seeing the 2 guys that you were begging to get out the whole season sit there and battle one another. And that could be what we're facing here with 48, is we've been through the dog days. We've been through 3 or 4 really predictable episodes in a row now that made us eye roll, but now we can finally cash in on some of that good faith that we've built up. Yeah. We can finally reap the benefits of sitting through a few boring weeks, because by the weeks being boring, we've kept the contenders in the game for as long as possible. And now it's anyone's game with 10 days until finale day.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that's the thing, right? Like 43, I still think is one of the strongest seasons of the new era, because of the gameplay that takes place. And like, honestly, the Gabler shock is like, whoa, okay. I like being surprised at a finale, but I know there's a lot of people who hate that season because they're like, Gabler shouldn't have won. Okay, if you think the winner is the most important thing, then that's fine. But when you look at, on some of these seasons, like you're talking about Dom and Wendell, I remember coming on the podcast after the Ghost Island finale, Alexa and I had never been more stoked to talk about Survivor than after the 36 finale. Like, that was the most insane, crazy moment we had seen. And we were so excited to sit down and talk about that. And I remember being like, I've hated this season the whole time. I've liked Dom and Wendell, but nobody else is doing anything. And then I'm like, we're never going to see that again. Like, that is history.
Yeah.
This could still do it. I just think at this point, Unfortunately, I don't feel like we have a Dom and a Wendell right now because the editing has just been a little bit stagnant.
And I'm not trying to make this comparison because I think this would be blasphemous, but like, allow me to just let's talk about Kagiyan. I don't know why that season comes to mind, but let's compare 48 to Kagiyan real quick. I think Kagiyan goes through a real lull of a stretch of boring characters being voted out,
The
right?
whole Beauty Tribe.
Jeremiah, we'll see you later. Jeffra, we'll see you later. LJ, we'll see. It's Tony calling these shots, voting out the people that you kind of knew weren't winning anyway. LJ had a Hail Mary's chance, but Jeremiah and Jeffra were never winning that show, and you could tell from episode 1. It's Tony, but and those are lull episodes, right? Where you're not stoked and there's not a huge move being made. And because of it, you get geared up for a final 5, final 6 that has Trish, Tasha, Spencer, Cass, Woo, Tony, electric end. 3 people that can potentially win the game, right? Tony's the odds-on favorite. Spencer's kind of like the underdog hero. Is there a world where Cass or Woo stumble into the win if they're sitting next to the right person? And it creates for a really compelling dynamic down to the wire. And Kagiyan is reflected on as one of the best seasons of all time, because if you have enough entertaining characters that the audience is invested in, and then you have, I think ideally it's like you have a deserving winner and a second placer or a person who goes out right before the finale that gives the deserving winner a good run for their money that was also very deserving. So people are like push and pull.
Yeah.
That makes for a great season. It's why Second Chance is my favorite season, because there were people that were like, I love Jeremy. People that said, I love Kelly. Both of them were in the game all the way to the very end. And after Kelly gets voted out at the final 4, I mean, everybody pretty much knew Jeremy was going to win. And that's fine. Yeah, it's a fast forward. So I think, like you said, right? Like the editing, the way that these characters have been set up, it doesn't set us up to have like the most investment into the characters, which is where this season is different and falls short of a great all-time season like Kagiyan. But it doesn't mean that we can't have a really compelling end to the story when you have a lot of like the big names still in it at the end and nobody's been making a move.
I mean, Will was saying, and Will loves to say these things. I don't know if he's still feeling the same way, but Will was saying like this is his least favorite season of the new era. He doesn't think it's salvageable, any of that. This was on the recap last week. And I understand where he's coming from, but I haven't actually been that low on this season until the last 2 episodes. And I think that that's pretty well documented, to the point of most of the comments we were getting on the videos was Phil has the worst takes. He's so stupid. This season sucks. And like, I'm not just saying that to say that. Like, if I like it, I like it. If I don't, I don't. I was into the season of the David blindside. I said, see, it was just set up. Cedric and Chrissy had to go so that we could get to the game now. But then the problem is you get the fake hiccup, and then it just comes right back down, and you're like, oh, okay, actually, David was a blip in what has otherwise been a very predictable boot order here in the post-merge. But I do think that, look, 41 is my least favorite season ever. That's because it's not Survivor. And a lot of people will be like, oh, you got to like, Phil, you're going to realize that when you rewatch it, that's not true. But like once they instituted the hourglass and everything like that, that season it introduced too many bad things about Survivor for me. Nothing could save that season. And for me, it's like, sure, put an asterisk next to it and say, not Survivor. That's why I rank it. Like when I go through and like I look at the other new era seasons, this can be better than some. It's not going to be 47. It's not going to be 46. And in my opinion, it's not 43. But it can, and it's not 45. But it can be better than 44, 42, and 41. Why not? And maybe it can get up to like the bottom, like cling to the bottom of one of those other seasons, right? But that's it. That's all. That's where I feel on it. Now, if it ends with Joe wins 8-0 over Eva and Mitch, oh man, like that's not good TV. That's bad season.
Bad TV, but Joe, I mean, where's Joe in the all-time winner rankings?
Probably,
yeah,
right?
It's like if he runs the whole season and wins unanimously and he says from the beginning, I'm going to get her to the end, and then gets her to the end and still wins unanimously, that's Joe's in the Hall of Fame.
That's like, Kim, that's Boston Rob. I mean, that's those seasons, and there's a reason why we rank those so low.
Right. Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, good winners almost always are low on the rankings of like good seasons, because you really need that special blend of like really awesome, deserving player goes up against another really awesome, deserving player, and one of them pulls it out at the end in order to have both of, the both of those things.
And that's why China is my favorite season. There you go. Exactly
There
what
we
you
go.
just said there, because you had that up until the end where you're like, wow, I really don't know who's going to pull this. You get a great winner, you get a great season, and that's why I
Yeah.
go there. All right, we're almost at an hour and 40 minutes. I know we got to go. It's Mother's Day though, Sam, and I have to put you on the spot here because when I met you at the Ron Clark event,
Yeah.
you were like, "Oh, Phil, we're doing." I was like, "Sam, you do realize this is Mother's Day, right?" Because I had just had the realization like 2 days before Easter that it was Easter, and Tom were like, "Yo, we can't podcast on Easter. We got to figure this out." And I was like, "It's Mother's Day," and you started listing off all these Survivor mothers that I should be having on the podcast instead of you. I don't know if you remember that or not, but this is burned in my memory. Do you have like a favorite Survivor mother that you want to give a shout out here on?
Wow.
Before I let you go.
Yeah, I mean, I have one, sure. I mean, it's very recency bias, but like I have to give some love to Survivor mother, also known as mother on the show, Mama J, Julie Alley. Become very good friends with Julie. She's here in Nashville with me, and I absolutely adore her. So I think she has to get a special, a real life mother, 2 kids. So happy Mother's Day to Julie, and then happy Survivor Mother's Day to Julie as well.
I love that because you didn't like, you're not just like, it's not an internet mother. It's a real mother. It's like,
real mother. Yeah.
It really is. Unlike everybody on your season, right? Who is just mother across the board. It didn't matter.
Yeah, right. I've seen some people in the chat are saying that they've got some questions or whatever. If you've got time, I can do a couple of those as well. I don't want to leave anybody itching for some questions to get answered.
Some of the questions are dumb, such as, have you ever gotten a wedgie? And it's like, no, we're not going to ask
that one. We're not answering.
Yeah,
no.
that's like what I'm saying here is like, what's going on? Here, let's do this one from Ellis Axon. Are we forgetting about the confessional where Joe says he would fall on his sword for Eva? Is that more important than we think?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. Right. It's like, I think it's in there for one of 2 reasons. It's either in there because Joe falls on his sword for Eva, or it's in there because it's supposed to show Joe's character and genuity when he says that thing, right? And it's supposed to bond us to Joe as a human. And it could be either.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that too. It's like when you read into that, when you look at that, it's just kind of like, ooh, like it could be the biggest confessional of the season, and it could absolutely mean nothing, and it could just mean that maybe Joe goes home at 4, maybe he loses fire, like some people are saying. Eva's at final 3.
Yeah. I mean, the edit, trying to read the edit in Survivor is so hard, but it's so easy watching a season back. Like, go watch a season back and you will realize the importance of every little thing that is shown the way that it is shown. It's because they are beautiful, brilliant storytellers and they know how to tell a story. And sometimes people read into stuff. They're like, this is so important. This is going to be, I remember when 47 was airing, people thought that like the glue guy confessional was the most important thing in the world, where they were like, Sam's the glue guy. But then somebody else said that they viewed Rachel as the glue of Gata, which was kind of like the least true thing possible in terms of like the reality of what was going on in the game. But everybody thought it was this huge deal. I'm like, I don't think that's why they showed that. I think they showed that because they were showing somebody's read was off and not because they were trying to like foreshadow the future of the season.
Yeah.
So,
I do like that. And yeah, I think that sometimes like that's why I've been really leaning into Kyle and Camilla, because I feel like Kyle and Camilla's edit has been more about them being right. And Kyle, it's all about timing. It's all about timing. Whereas Joe and Eva, it has been a little bit like, so we're just going to like do what we're going to do. And like, we're going to get through. And it's like Kyle and Camilla have been given some better content. And, like Shahin saying, I think I can beat Joe. Maybe he's wrong. Maybe he's right. But they put in stuff all the time that's either wrong or right. I guess the big one here, if we're going to give like an actual answer to it, because I don't think we ever came to a conclusion of who the person would be, is Lexa Power says, what do you guys think happens if Mitch wins immunity next week? Like, so if he does win immunity, who do you think would, like, we discussed this, but who do you really put your finger on and say they're gone?
I think Shahin goes. If Mitch wins immunity, I think Shahin goes.
Because do you think that would be Mitch, Kyle, and Camilla teaming up and essentially forcing the hand of Joe and
or Mitch? No, if Mitch wins immunity, Joe goes. I take it back.
Okay.
I think
So
Mitch gets empowered in that world, right? Mitch is feeling good. He's feeling feisty. He wants to take a shot. Because Mitch wins, Joe and Eva probably pivot to Camilla, and that is what sends Kyle over the edge to like actually go and make the move. So I think that Joe would go in a world where Mitch wins immunity.
That's true. And then Lexa Power says, wouldn't Eva play her idol for Joe? How would they blindside him? She doesn't know it's coming.
If she doesn't know it's coming and she tries to save it for 5, like, yeah.
I know that would be compelling. I don't think Mitch is going to win it, but hey, they did have Mitch being good at challenges early on, but maybe that's just because he was good early on. Like sometimes, like again, you were talking about the edit, like sometimes you're just good and then you're not, or sometimes it's important and then it's not. And so, yeah. There really wasn't too much. We kind of jumped in and we got him, and a lot of the questions in here are just silly at this point.
Okay. No worries.
I'm gonna wrap this thing up. I also podcasted for 2 hours earlier talking about Survivor 50 stuff with Tegwith. So that was how I spent 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock today. And now I'm here with you from 5 to 7. So I'm like,
take a break.
Right? This is my off day, everybody. I'm off. But yeah, thank you so much, Sam. This is a great conversation. I loved having you on. I'm glad we were able to get this done, and would love to have you on again in the future if you're so inclined.
Oh, absolutely. Let's do it. This was fun.
Awesome. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. If you are looking for some Survivor 50 content, Tegwith and I put out an episode earlier today. Tegwith's first episode as an official specialist. So this is a big deal, everybody. And we're doing big time giveaways here. I got a loggy buff for everybody who's not tired of hearing about Joe and everything. That's going to be part of the prize package. We're doing a game for Guess the Cast for Survivor 50. So go ahead over there and sign up for that. You have until May 18th at 1 p.m. There is no way anybody gets in after that. So hurry up and start doing it now. Otherwise, we'll be back on Wednesday night. Will and I will be recapping right after the episode as we dive in and talk about either a really crazy move or Mitch going home. It's going to be interesting which one it is. Sam and I both think it's probably going to be Mitch. So thank you all so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you Wednesday night.